When we picture the Tudors, our minds usually jump to grand palaces, all that royal intrigue, and of course, those larger-than-life monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. But what if I told you that beneath that glittering surface, Tudor England was absolutely simmering with discontent? Well, this explainer is going to dive into why this supposed golden age was also, you might say, an age of rebellion. So, was it really this golden age of stability and power? Or was the reality for most people something far more volatile? The truth is, the Tudor dynasty, which was born from the chaos of the Wars of the Roses, was pretty much constantly fighting to keep a lid on its own people. And we're not just talking about a few minor riots here and there. Nope, we're talking about a kingdom in a near constant state of protest, where ordinary people, again and again, took up arms against the crown. I mean, just look at this timeline. From Henry VII's reign right through to Elizabeth's, major rebellions were erupting almost every single decade. You've got the Yorkshire and Cornish rebellions, the absolutely massive Pilgrimage of Grace, the explosive Summer of 1549, and the Northern Rebellion. This wasn't just a series of isolated incidents, this was a persistent, burning issue. For a long time, history really just focused on the big players, right? The disgruntled earls and dukes plotting away in their castles. But was that really the whole story? Were these rebellions just top-down plots by the elite? Or was this a genuine, bottom-up surge of popular anger? To really answer that, we've got to shift our perspective. Let's move away from the throne room for a minute and head out into the fields and villages. Let's look at history from the ground up. And a key figure in making this shift is the historian Andy Wood. He basically argues that to truly get a handle on Tudor England, you can't just focus on the kings and queens. You have to listen to the voices of the common people. Wood champions this idea of popular politics, and this is a real game-changing concept. It's the idea that ordinary farmers, artisans, and laborers, they weren't just mindless followers. No, they had their own political goals. They knew when they were being squeezed, and they saw rebellion as a desperate, sure, but also a necessary way to negotiate with a government that felt miles away. And for Wood, the number one trigger was crystal clear. As he puts it, the most prominent cause of rebellion in pre-Reformation Tudor England was taxation. Now, that's the period before Henry VIII's big religious revolution. So according to Wood, the root of all this trouble wasn't faith, it was finances. It was all about the economy. So, okay, that's the argument, but where's the evidence? What were the specific burdens that drove thousands of people to risk their lives, to risk everything, by rising up against the state? Well, the grievances were just relentless. First, you have these new kinds of taxes that unfairly hammered the poor. Then there's enclosure, where wealthy landlords just start fencing off common land that entire villages depended on for their survival. Add to that soaring rents and crippling inflation, and what you have is a perfect storm of economic misery. And people knew this wasn't just bad luck, it was policy, and they knew exactly who to blame. And you can see the direct line between taxes and rebellion in action. In 1489, Yorkshire rose up because of taxes for a war with France. Then, in 1497, Cornwall refused to pay for a war with Scotland. And in 1525, this thing called the Amicable Grant, basically a forced loan that Parliament hadn't even approved, it caused such huge resistance that the Duke of Norfolk reported the whole country was about to explode. The government actually had to back down. That was popular politics, and it was working. But maybe the clearest example of this social conflict boiling over was Kett's rebellion in 1549. This wasn't just about a single tax. Oh no. This was a full-blown assault on the power of the landowning gentry. It was the sharpest, most direct popular statement against the power of landlords that England would see before the Civil War. And just listen to the rebels' own words. This is from their list of demands. They weren't just asking for lower rents. They said, "We pray that all bondmen may be made free." They were demanding a fundamental change to society, arguing for the end of serfdom itself. And they were using the language of religious equality to make a deeply radical political point. I mean, that is a profound statement of popular politics. This deep-seated class tension, it ran through so many of these uprisings. Even in the Pilgrimage of Grace, which definitely had strong religious motives, there was this immense suspicion of the gentry. This quote from a rebel letter is so revealing. They're basically saying, we cannot trust the very people who are supposed to be our leaders. So, the case for economic and social causes it's powerful.
But, it's never that simple, is it? To really see the full picture, we have to look beyond the fields and into the churches and the courtrooms, because there were other powerful forces at play. So the debate really boils down to this. On one side, you've got Andy Wood's focus on those bottom-up grievances, taxation, enclosure, class conflict. But on the other side, you have these powerful counter-arguments, pointing to the explosive religious chaos of the Reformation and, of course, the ambition of nobles trying to grab more power for themselves. And look, the power of faith, you simply cannot ignore it. For thousands of people, the attack on the old Catholic religion was an attack on their communities, on their traditions, on their very path to salvation. The Pilgrimage of Grace was this massive crusade to bring back the monasteries. The Western Rebellion was sparked by pure fury over the New English Prayer Book. These people were fighting for their souls. And we can't forget about high politics. Disgruntled nobles often took advantage of popular anger for their own ends. Take the Northern Rebellion of 1569. It wasn't just a popular Catholic rising. It was orchestrated by powerful earls who had a very specific political plot to marry the Duke of Norfolk to Mary Queen of Scots and change the royal succession. So how in the world do we reconcile these different views? Well, to get the full picture, we need to understand how these different causes often tangled together to create a truly explosive mix.
The reality is that Tudor rebellions were rarely caused by just one thing. They were a combustible mix. Economic hardship created the fuel, a huge mass of angry, desperate people. Religious conviction often provided the spark that lit the fuse, and political ambition from the elites, well, that often fanned the flames for their own purposes. So what's the big takeaway here? Andy Wood's work was absolutely a revolutionary paradigm shift. It forced us to see these events through the eyes of ordinary people, and to recognize them not as chaotic mobs, but as political actors. They were organized, they had clear goals, and they were taking part in a desperate but very real form of politics to protest policies that were wrecking their lives. So while popular politics is the essential starting point, the full story is really a complex tapestry woven from three distinct threads: the poverty of the common people, the piety of the faithful, and the political power plays of the elite. Every rebellion had a slightly different pattern, but all three of those threads were almost always in there somewhere. Which leaves us with a final, provocative question. What really is the best way to understand the past? Do we look down from the perspective of kings and nobles, or do we look up from the fields and villages with the common people? The story of the Tudor Rebellion suggests the only real answer is you have to do both.